we're going to go over our packet. And of course, so in today's class, we focus mainly on the packet. We'll do a project at the end. And then when we have next week's class, we'll get into some more details of other writing tools and techniques. I hope that everybody was able to print this packet out, or if you do not, you can just follow along when I use my, I like to use the tracing paper over the following sheets. If you don't have the packet with you, you can just grab a Crayola would work, pencil, honestly, any writing tool of your choice, just so that you can understand the technique of a modern calligraphy, and you can do it that way, any piece of paper and writing tool, and just follow along that way. If not, write directly in the packet or use a tracing paper. Some words of encouragement I always like to read at the beginning of class. Anyone can hand letter as long as you're willing to practice. Think of lettering as drawing shapes. Lettering is not cursive. While learning this new skill, go slow and controlled. Don't worry about shakiness. In the beginning, focus on each stroke and understand how each letter form is created. Okay, we're going to move on to page 2. I like to jump right into the strokes, and I want you to just follow along with me and practice these strokes so that once we go through the rest of the pages, it's going to make a lot more sense. So every time your pen goes up, it's considered an upstroke, and you're going to use the tip of your pen with light pressure from the bottom up, upstroke, tip of your pen. Every time your pen goes downward motion, it's a downstroke, top down, full pressure from top to bottom. Downstroke, overturn stroke, bottom left, up and over. Once you're over, back down to full pressure. Underturn stroke starts on the top left with full pressure, release before the bottom, back up into light upstroke. Compound curve is a combination of the overturn and underturn. Starts on the bottom left with light pressure, over full pressure, release before the bottom, and back up. Oval. With the oval, I like to start a little off to the left. Start with light pressure, go over, down, full pressure, release before the bottom, and connect where you started. So again, a little over to the left, oval around, and connect. And reverse oval a little to the right. Just go backwards. And always release before you, release right before the bottom. Ascending loop starts here in the middle with light, upstroke, backwards into full downstroke, full pressure downstroke. Ascending loop starts from the top with heavy downstroke, release before the bottom, go backwards, and stop halfway down your downstroke. So these are our basic strokes. And this is what I mentioned in the words of encouragement. In the begin, focus on each stroke and how each letter form is created. So now that you got a little feel for what are basic strokes, let's move on to page 2. I'm sorry, page 3. And then I'm just going to go over it one more time here on the top. Oh, let me say something about this page. Here on page 3, this is what I refer to as a reference guide. Whenever you're going to sit down for the day and practice, pull this out of your packet, have it off to the side, and just use this as a little reference guide to remind you of each stroke that goes into your alphabet. And yeah. Okay, so here on the top, we're going to just go over our basic strokes one more time. Have our oh, and that's I was going to mention also, every time you sit down to start practice, I always recommend starting off with your basic strokes and then maybe working to your alphabet, just to warm up your hand and warm up that muscle memory that you're creating. Definitely help before moving into projects. Here in this middle section, it's just a combination of every time, it actually showing you every time the pen is lifted to create the next stroke. A good way to practice this middle section, let me grab a smaller brush pen. A little technique you can do when practicing is actually perform the first stroke and roll your wrist backwards. So actually remove the pen, lift it completely from the paper, and this will help remind you to lift your pen in between every stroke. And what that does, it just helps show every thick and thin. So if you train yourself to lift your pen in between every stroke, you're guaranteed to get the strokes the way they're supposed to look. So just continue here. So you'll do an oval, roll your wrist back, do an underturn, roll your wrist back, ascending loop, roll back. See? And we'll do one more. So that's a little tip I wanted to add to that portion of the packet. Here we have our alphabet breakdown. I'll go over a few of the more challenging letters that I had difficulties in the beginning. Just right off the bat, for example, letter F and R. I know it shows here multiple strokes, but for example, put this down. For example, the breakdown is the technical strokes that will go into that create the letter form. But in reality, when you're writing a word with the letter F, you're not going to lift your hand after every stroke. You're eventually supposed to practice as one stroke. I hope that makes sense. Not all of them are like that, but the more you practice, you're going to understand. So this alphabet breakdown is more so just a guide of every single stroke that creates that letter. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so first two letters that gave me problems when I started were the R and the S. It's very similar to the letter F. As I was explaining, there are multiple strokes, but when practicing, you're going to practice it in one single stroke. So, for example, so what I mean, you want to just go right into your upstroke, never release your pen, and go directly into a downstroke. I mean, underturn stroke. With modern calligraphy, you do start creating your own techniques. Technique as far as adding your own little loop here, adding an extended entrance stroke, or adding an extended exit stroke. So here, this is my own little touch to the letter R, where if you feel more comfortable or you like the looks without the loop, you can also practice a letter R without a loop, or even just our regular cursive, but of course with thick and thin. So here, this little loop is more of a modern touch to our calligraphy. And same thing for the letter S, it's performed in one stroke as opposed to 3 different. So those were 2 big things for me when I first started. I just couldn't get the hang of it until I started teaching myself not to lift the pen. Letter S is another, I mean, honestly, every alphabet in the letter, you can just make it your own. Once you start getting comfortable, you can add your own touches. Another variation of the letter S can be adding a loop to the bottom or not doing anything at all. Let me see. Another one was difficult was the M and the N. I highly, highly recommend lifting your pen. So completely opposite than R and S. With the M and the N, you want to be sure to lift your pen. So on here, let's practice writing it by rolling our hand back to ensure we're lifting our pen. So we have an overturn, lift, overturn, lift, compound, curve, lift. So then when you put them closer to each other and you slightly overlap them, that's how the letter forms are created using our basic strokes. So let's practice the letter N. Overturn, lift, compound, curve, lift. Overturn, lift, slightly touching my first stroke, compound, curve, lift. So those are my pointers for just those more complicated strokes. Are there any alphabets that you would like for me to show? If anybody wants to just unmute themselves and give me an alphabet that you would like for me to explain.
The X.
Okay, we could do the X. Okay, so here with the X, you have your compound curve that we naturally want to go up and down. But here with the X, I would probably refer to this as an extended compound curve. So you're going to extend, drop down in the center like a compound curve, and extend out. So it's an open compound curve. And with the cross through, you always want to start from the bottom up, never from the top down, because look how much thicker it is naturally when you go from the top down. So an extended compound curve, cross over from the bottom up. Do that one more time. There and there. Another thing I want to point out is here in the alphabet breakdown, I do have every entrance stroke and every exit stroke imaginable. And I can't stress it enough, but practice with entrance strokes and exit strokes. Always, always, always. Don't ever leave it out. Don't just go into a letter and just say, okay, we're just going to jump right into it and do the letter B. No. The proper way to practice is your entrance, your B, and your exit. And that's the exact way you want to practice. Why? Because it's going to give you the basically the readiness. I wouldn't know how to say it. So sets you up for your next letter. Not only sets you up for your next letter, but gives you enough distance between. One of my classes, I had somebody ask, how do you make sure there's enough space so that they don't look so squashed? And this is the answer. If you practice entrance and exits, no matter what you're doing, it always guarantees enough space so that you can perform your next two strokes. So in this instance, I didn't need to have an entrance stroke in front of my second letter because it was already set up for me, but I'm going to do my exit stroke. So make sure you always practice entrance and exits. Does anybody want to give me another alphabet to break down?
This is Anne. I missed the very beginning. What kind of brush pen are you using?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so here, this is what we recommend in the beginning. It is called a Tombow. Later on, if you do have this, we can go over our page 7, and it's listed on the very first line underneath brush pen. It is a Tombow Furanisku small brush pen. You can
You
find
can order on Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah, I was about to say. The most inexpensive way, it's a 2-pack. It's a blue barrel and a green barrel. The blue barrel has, oh, you can't see it with my shadow, but the blue barrel has an H next to the barcode, and it stands for hard. And then the green barrel is soft. So honestly, everybody's different. I always recommend picking up that pack because you're going to have a hard tip and you're going to have a soft, flexible tip, and play with both of them. Eventually you'll get to learn both of them. And which one's easier? It's a personal preference. It's not until you start practicing you find what works best for you.
Okay, Rachel, could you do the letter P
Yes,
as in
ma'am.
page, please?
Okay. All right.
How could you tell me to get this?
Okay. So P, 4 strokes, entrance, descending, oval, exit. So we have entrance, descending. Remember to slightly overlap. So I'm just barely touching, and then your exit. So with this one, this is one you definitely want to separate. Unless you want to get more creative and add your own touch, more than welcome to add a loop to the P. if you even want it to touch. Any more alphabet breakdowns? Or any questions?
I haven't practiced them all yet, so I'll probably have questions once I do.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. You can always direct your questions to Ashley, and she's always welcome to forward them to me. I'll be willing to answer any questions. So let's go and move on to page 4. Now that we got a feel for what to do, you know, what our basic strokes are, we got to feel, you know, the thick and thin and understand how to connect our letters and always practice our entrance and exit strokes. Just some 4 basic tips that you always want to know and keep in mind. There are basics without any extensive details, but you can always refer to this section as well if you're having any trouble with your letters and strokes not looking the way you want it to. So here you want to always keep in mind that every time the pen is going toward you, it's going to be a downstroke and you're going to apply full pressure. So no matter what, every time the pen's going down, it will be full pressure. If you do not have a flexible pen and all you have a Crayola, you're going to use the side of your pen and just apply full pressure down. Every time the stroke is going away from your body in an upward motion, it's always going to be the tip of your pen and you're never going to apply pressure on the way up. It's always going to be the tip of your pen. Same thing for Crayola. Release pressure and just use the very tip of your pen. Ironically enough, this works just like a brush pen. As soon as you apply pressure, it thickens up. Your pen, you always want to keep it at an angle. At a 45-degree angle, you never want your pen straight up and down. You're not going to be doing your brush strokes with this motion. It's always going to be at a 45-degree angle. And then 2 and 4 actually go hand in hand. So while holding it at a 45-degree angle and you still can't get your formations correct, try holding it in the middle of the barrel with light pressure and try creating your strokes that way. Every time you have an oval, an underturned stroke, a compound curve, you always want to release right before the bottom. If not, you'll end up with too much pressure here if you release too late. So you don't want to end up like this. You want to release around, like I always say, right before the bottom. So heavy pressure down, start lifting your pen and back up. So the bottom area you always want to be, basically it's going to look like a thin stroke. Again, your underturns, your compound curve, and your ovals. And I guess it goes for the top as well, because so in reverse to this, it would be start with light pressure, go over, and don't apply pressure until you're over this area. Any questions before I move on to foligraphy? Okay, so with foligraphy, I always like to teach Hello? Was it, somebody have a question? Okay. I always like to teach foligraphy because it's going to teach you, or let's read that here. Will help you understand the thick and thin strokes, meaning, you know, on our basic strokes, it's going to help you understand what side it's supposed to go on. And in order to perform the foligraphy, you're going to use any non-flexible pen or even a pencil to imitate the look of calligraphy. So here I have a regular pen, a pencil, and these are my favorite. They're called a Pigma Micron pen. And sometimes you'll hear me say monoline. And when you hear that, it means basically non-flexible. So monoline pens would be more on this aspect because you can actually create calligraphy with pencil, but we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to just use my Pigma pen. And oh, also another thing with foligraphy, you can use the open space and fill it in with color if that's the look you choose to go for, because that's another trend as well. Just leaving it open, filling it in, or again, just leaving it with no color. But learning foligraphy, you want to do your, let's do the word high. You want to make sure every time you write the letter, you're going to keep the strokes in mind. So for example, this is the H, but I did a compound curve here. And the letter I, this here is an underturn. Okay. So then the second stroke, the second line will be the downstroke. So on the word high, the first stroke is a downstroke. The second one is a thin stroke. The third one here is a downstroke. So again, it's on every downstroke. I'm sorry. Right here, it's an upstroke, so it'll be thin. And then on the underturn, the first stroke is a thick. Sorry, I hope that makes sense. So, for example, if you don't have a flexible pen and you're referring to this alphabet breakdown, that's what's going to help you understand. So here, the letter H. Actually, I didn't even do that right. So have it like that. So H is an ascending loop with the compound curve. So see, there you go. Thin, thick, thin stroke, thick, and then back up thin. So there be situations where you want your font to look like calligraphy. So it's to imitate the look of calligraphy. That's when you go in and you fill it because we're working with a non-flexible pen. And we fill it in. If not, and you choose to learn calligraphy for more of a decorative, creative way, you can add doodles or just go in and fill in that open space with color. So there's different reasons why you want to learn foligraphy, but just right off the bat, to understand where your thick and thin strokes go is a good reason to learn. Do I have any questions on this portion before I move on? Okay. All right, so I have a blank sheet here. You can grab any, actually, page 5, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a lined paper in there. Am I right? I just don't have that,
Yes.
that one printed. Okay. I think because I wrote on it last class. So it's fine. I'm just going to write on this one. So, one thing like I mentioned, practice, practice, practice. So I put a blank sheet here so that you can practice what I like to call an alphabet drill. And when the alphabet drill, you can use any writing tool of your choice. If you want to switch it up and fill up one line, I'm about to show you, demonstrate you how I like to do the alphabet drill. But you can fill up each line using a different writing tool of choice. You can do just foligraphy or just a pencil. I mean, whatever you have available, or if you want to just do the whole entire alphabet and every line, get creative and change your writing tool. But let's see, what is our letter of the month? We have J. So let's use J as our example. So what I like to do is the first letter is always going to stay the same. So I'm going to do J with my exit stroke and A. And the second letter is going to change, and that's what we're going to follow. That's how we're going to follow our alphabet. So first letter stays the same. Second letter goes down the alphabet. And then I'm just going to switch pens just so that you can get an idea of how different ways you can do the alphabet drill. Another way, if you don't want, if you can go down and just continue C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. Another way I've done it is D, is repeat the same letter over and over again. So this would be considered, a foligraphy drill. So if you just want to practice foligraphy over and over. But what I mean is just constantly repeat the same combination all the way or even halfway. But the point is you're creating muscle memory. And I mean, you probably won't even have those combinations, but what it's doing is just teaching you, putting you in some weird combinations just for more practice. Let's practice with the Crayola. So like I said, you can continue through the alphabet, switch up your writing tool, and even continue on for a whole line or just half the page. Crayolas tend to be categorized as a large brush pen. They're not going to be as small as the first one I was writing with, which is a Tombow. So I'm going to make this one 2 lines. Move on to the alphabet. E. Let's scoot over because the F is big. That's an example of writing with the Crayola. And then, believe it or not, pencil. Pencil is another way to learn calligraphy. The way you do it is every time your pen goes up, you're going to have light pressure. You probably won't be able to see it too good, but let's just say up, light, and down, dark. So every time you have an upstroke, you're gonna do light pressure. Every time you have a downstroke, you're gonna apply heavy pressure. So continuing to H. So light, dark, light, ascending down. And I'm applying pressure as if it were a flexible brush pen. A double J. This is a fun way to teach yourself how to apply pressure. I know sometimes you pick up a brush pen and you kind of hesitant to apply pressure. First off, these pens are made to be forced to put force on and flex the tip. If you try doing a few alphabets, a few combinations using a pencil and then switch directly over to a flexible pen, you're definitely going to see the difference. And basically that's it for this page. Again, this is here so that you can continue on and just practice however you like. But that's how I like to perform the alphabet breakdown. And I highly recommend challenging yourself and going through the whole alphabet. It's fun. I did it. I went from A all the way to ZZ. Okay, so next, or any questions? I'm sorry, before I move on. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna stop on the worksheet. I'm sorry, stop on the workbook and move on to our worksheet. I like to go over these last 3 pages at the end of class because these are more tips, recommendations, and this last page I do not go over in detail. This is just a cheat sheet for you to have on hand whenever you're doing lettering. So let's just put this packet aside and move on to our worksheet. The one with the J and January. And this was actually a coincidence because those of you who have been following us, we're actually going in order of the alphabet. And for example, next month, we're going to go over the letter K. And then we just follow through the month that we're working on. So today we have J and J. All right. So on this, you can write directly on the paper, of course. I'm preserving it so I can go over it again next week. So I'm using it with tracing paper. You can use any writing tool of your choice. And let me see, I'm going to just use a blue pen. Let me know if there's any trouble seeing it, Ashley, please. Okay, so here the letter J is actually what we call uppercase copperplate. And it is 2 strokes. So I'm going to demonstrate the J first and then break down the strokes. Okay, so you start with your extended downstroke. And here you see how the loop, I did not create the loop in one stroke. What I did was add a little tail. So just starting with the tip of my pen, I'm not going, I'm not going too far across, I'm just doing a slight little touch with the tip of my pen and directly going straight into a downstroke. And then, of course, like a letter J, cross it over and give it a little tail. And then with the second stroke, you're actually gonna, that's when you're gonna create the loop. And touching here like that. So give it a little hook on the top, cross it over. So it's, this kind of looks like a letter C. So here, just looking in this area, it's like a big letter C, but you're gonna add a little hook to the top. But when you're working closer to each other, it's kind of hard having them separated. So let me do that here with the little tap, straight down, full pressure, loop it through. And then that's when I create my loop here on the top. A big letter C, and then hook it back up to the dotted line. So do it one more time. Unless you need me to, again, feel free to unmute yourself if I need to explain more. I'm more than happy to do that for you. Just barely tap it down, full pressure release before the bottom, loop it through, and then create your little hook on the top. Full pressure like a big letter C, and continue up to the dotted line. All right, letter J, pretty simple, self-explanatory. Entrance, descending, exit stroke. So see, sometimes the more you get comfortable, you can actually do your exit stroke instead of lifting. So for example, I wouldn't just stop there and then kind of guess the flow doesn't go correctly. But again, in the beginning, you want to practice separating everything just to get an understanding of how everything is created. This is normally my section where I would do a bounce letter J. Not much you can do with the letter J. It's a bounce letter as it is. So I just went ahead and added a swirl to the exit stroke there. For the foligraphy J, I'm gonna pick up my Pigma. Or you know what, let me show you with the pen. Okay, so here, the way I teach foligraphy in my worksheets, I like to leave this space open just so that you don't see a cross through. Teaches you to leave it open for any filling, coloring, or doodling that you want to do. So here with this letter J, I'm gonna actually do the first stroke and stop so that I can leave the right side open. And then add the tails on each side after. See that there? This pen doesn't like my tracing paper. The letter J, do the first stroke, stop before you cross it over. Add the second downstroke, and then the tail. Okay, that's it for our little J practice. And this is just a little section for our quote. of the month, we're just going to write Happy New Year. Let's practice rolling our wrists back. So, like I mentioned before, R and S's are normally performed in one stroke. So even when they are in a word, you're gonna teach yourself eventually how to combine the previous stroke and to never lift your pen and go directly into the R or the S. And sometimes you'll end up with the R and an S and you're going to not want to lift your pen. Why? Because you don't want to see a disconnect. So for example, normally I would say lift your pen after every stroke. So this is about the area I would lift. But since there's an R after, I want it to be a seamless flow without any disconnect. And again, it only goes for R's and S's. Again, as you learn more and more, you're going to find other combinations that you're going to teach yourself not to lift and when to lift. But in the beginning, always lift. Okay, so here I went ahead and did the word January, but I broke it down into the strokes first, and then we're going to combine all these strokes and write the word January. Oh, let me move it up. Entrance, descending, combined with the exit, reverse oval, and this is a fun one. It's a reverse compound curve. And then a compound, underturn, underturn, reverse oval. See, this is what I was explaining a little while ago. Combination of the previous stroke, which is an underturn directly into an R. This is let me see, a compound curve and a descending loop. Okay, next we have what I call our bounce line. Just a brief explanation of bounce. You want to keep in mind with bounce, it's more of every other. So more as to every letter every word that you do, the letters are never always going to bounce the same. So I recommend for bounce here and flourish, always start with your basics. One thing I haven't mentioned is I love to sketch. What I mean is grabbing a pencil, sketching out your word, and figure out where you want your bounce and figure out where you want your flourish. This rule goes especially for bounce and flourishes. It's just really hard. It doesn't come natural. if you want it to look right, you can definitely go for the bounce look and add, extended upstroke here and add a extended downwards. Go ahead and, play with it and do it freehand. But when you're getting started, just to understand the concept, sketch it out, kind of see, okay, you have naturally the J is going to be considered a bounce there. I can easily do a bounce there, but then I like the end to bounce. Or I mean, I could have easily bounced there, just depending how much you want. But in the end, you're going for an up and down look. And then same thing goes for the flourishes. You got to kind of start with your base height, or what we call your X height, and then see where you want to fill in the gaps. So that's just a briefing of those two techniques. Later on in the year, we're gonna break down each technique, and I'm gonna spend a lot more time breaking down different writing techniques and going over some worksheets with y'all. Okay, so here with January, I'm just gonna go ahead and trace it. Okay. I'm going to switch over and use my Pigma pen.
Rachel, that last pen you were using, what was that again?
Okay, the blue one.
Yes.
This here, I think it is on our recommendation list as well,
Mhm.
but this is the Pentel Touch.
Rachel, it's
So
out
we're-
of the
Okay.
camera.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There
You
you
probably
go.
can. Okay, you probably can't see the words, but it's probably.
Pentel Touch.
Yeah. So yeah, it's called Pentel
Mm-hmm.
Touch. But here you need it's a sign pen, and you're looking for the sparkle barrel. There
Mhm.
is a difference. The sparkle barrel. You can't see it, but there's glitter. And oh yeah, it says on the side, Pentel sign pen. If you look on Amazon, there are pens identical to this, but the tip will not flex. It will not flex. You have to look for these words: sign pen, sparkle barrel. Okay. That's a good pen. I think it's in the recommended list as well. Let me see. Yeah. It's a small brush pen. Okay. January and foligraphy. So remember, every time you're doing anything with foligraphy, always keep the strokes in mind. So as you're writing the letters, kind of write them in an extended form so that you have enough space to write your second line. You're not going to just write like that. You want to make it extended and wider than normal. Okay, this next row is what I call extended, also expanded form. This is a little harder to write since the word was longer, but extended entrance strokes and extended exit strokes. That's all. Lift your pen. Next formation with an extended exit stroke. Yep. Extend, go right into the R. Extend. Extend. Okay. So with the flourish January, I don't know why I put that pen back. Okay. Again, started with the base, but let me see. Yeah, so I hope y'all are able to see that. Y'all can kind of see this month and for the next few months, I created this worksheet with gray color as the flourish. It was kind of hard to add flourishes to the top with this word combination. So sometimes it's just hard to find the right word. I know you can see some other months I'll probably add some more flourishing to the top, but again, we can always go, I have flourish on the schedule for another month, go into more detail. So sometimes you can create the first letter and go back and add the flourish, but here on this J, it's probably easier just to go directly into the flourish and then into the letter J. And also, like I mentioned, if you were to do January, figure out your sketch, understand where you want your flourish, or for example, your bounce. And then when you go to actually create the letter, you don't have to separate it. You're going to practice in a way that you can just flow right into it. And it's not necessary to lift your pen just to add a flourish. There you go. Do I have any questions on our worksheet? Okay. So, I ended up what I'm gonna do, since it was a little hard to gather supplies and it's a little complicated to get, these bigger projects on such a small screen. I think this year we're gonna go back to just writing quotes and breaking it down and understanding techniques and learning different, writing with different tools. So here I have Crayola. Since this is the beginner class, I actually meant to create a quote using basic calligraphy. So I wanted to just write on a separate piece of paper this quote in calligraphy, if you choose to write it in calligraphy or in block lettering. The reason it ended up with block lettering is because I wanted to go into details, and I have some really cool activities for next week's class, talking all about block lettering and how to get it extremely straight. So again, this block lettering project was meant for next week's class, but we can do it for both. And I still have a second quote for next week as well. So what I want to start off by doing is just writing the quote on just any smooth paper you have. Let's just get a quote together and write it out. I'm just going to write the full quote in calligraphy for those of you who want to write. I don't know if you have this blank sheet, if you were able to print it or pick it up from the library. Like I said, I'm going to just write this quote using our calligraphy form so that y'all can get more practice with that. But I also will go ahead and just do the block as well, just not go into too many details. I want to save that for next week's class. So let's just write January. Oh, I'm about to do block. Okay, scratch that. Let's start off with lowercase. Let me see, I use 1, 2, 3, 4 squares as my X height. And then I'm going to go over that X height as well at the end of our packet. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One thing I also want to mention that depending on the size of your project, obviously you're gonna either use a large brush pen or a small brush pen. There might be situations where different scenarios. So for example, even though it is big lettering and I am using a large brush pen, I just still don't like the thickness of it. You can just always go back and add a second line as if it were foligraphy. So that's another good thing about learning foligraphy. Maybe you don't have to do all your letters for some reason that one specific stroke didn't come out as thick as you liked. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. It's your project, it's your writing. You make it the way you like it. And same thing goes for small brush pens. Just add your second stroke just to make it as thick and as thin as you like. So like I mentioned in the beginning, think of it as drawing. Calligraphy is definitely drawing. if you ask me. So that's a tip there. Add your second stroke, even though you're using a flexible pen. Like I said, if you want to write calligraphy on this paper, feel free to do so. But I will also do, I'm gonna do block here on my sketch pad. And again, I use Crayola. Use the brown one. Is anybody interested in doing the block right now? Because I can just do the block here and show you how I got the spacing. I'm just curious. Because I can write calligraphy here for you now, or if anybody is interested, I can write it this way right now as well. I just want to give y'all what y'all want.
I prefer the calligraphy.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's
Yeah,
do it
let's
like that.
stick with that.
All right. Like I said, next week, that was just a project so we can learn block lettering so we can incorporate it into our different quotes. But again, we have 2 different projects for next week. The way I've been sketching out these,
Next week.
let me see. Okay, on this one I did 0.5 and 3/4. So I'm gonna need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I left the space up on the top. So I have about 1.5 inches of space on the top. And then I'm just gonna line it up to the very top of the page. And using the border of the image, to keep me in line. So 1.5, and then I'm gonna mark it at every half and 3/4. So that's half, and then 1, 2, 3/4, half, 2, 3/4, half, 1, 2, 3/4. Okay, I hope y'all got those. So like I said, I left 1.5 inches from the top, or you can do whichever lines you like, depending on the size of tool you're using. But I did 1.5, and then 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1/2 inch, and 3/4. Okay. And then connect on each side. So whenever you're drawing your guidelines, you want to make sure that you just use the lightest pressure as possible. What I'm going to do, just kind of make it a little darker for the camera purpose of being on camera, but be sure to sketch it out so that it's easy to erase in the end. Oh, I don't even think I need this. Let me see.
Hmm.
3. 8. One more here at the bottom. Just gonna. Okay. So I'm just gonna write in these smaller areas. I'm gonna use Crayola. And then I'm just gonna write it in, keeping it within these 2 areas. Or let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Monday, but I'm gonna put 2 words right here. Nope, didn't fit, but we'll go down here. So that was me just creating the quote right now. One way I was creating the quotes for the next few months, I was honestly just getting my ruler. And I'm telling you this because whenever you do, you know, your own quotes while you're practicing, you're not quite sure what, you know, how thick or thin you want it. Honestly, I just started off with using the width of the ruler, and then I just went from there and kind of just took measurements and again sketched it out, wrote with a pencil, kind of figured out how thin or thick I wanted my lines, and then you can kind of just go from there and sketch it out that way. If you're going to use a small brush pen, maybe add another line here. I just found that the easiest way. So maybe if you're using a small brush pen, you can, you know, fill it in there. And if you use the width of a ruler, it's always going to be spaced out as you work down the page. In the past, whenever I would sketch out quotes, it was always hard, you know, like this, just to fit it in and fit the quote. And if you let the quote get in the way of your guidelines and kind of fit it onto your page, it's just going to confuse yourself more. So if you figure out the guidelines first and kind of see more or less, okay, these are how many lines I have, kind of let the guidelines control where the quote is going to go. And then, just keep note of the distance and, the process you made. But that's just a little note if you're going to work on quotes and projects yourself. Focus on the guidelines first and then the quote. I hope that helps. Because in the beginning, I spent so much time just taking measurements and figuring out, okay, this is going to go here, and then erasing, and then I would end up erasing the image completely off my page. And I mean, it's just, I recommend figuring out the lines first, for sure. The more words you have, the more lines you're going to add, of course. So this month, I'm going to, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about some block lettering and how we can incorporate it into our quotes. And then I started off with Crayola for the month because I want to just start off with basics. I know everybody should have at least a Crayola at home. I know we're going to get a lot of new calligraphers added to our classes. So I just wanted to touch base on Crayola, how we can incorporate some block lettering into our calligraphy. And then for Beth, this is just for you. In February, we're going to do a dip plan class. So that's going to be our second class in February. And we're going to use our dip pen and ink. So be ready for that. If you have some or you need any recommendations, if you want to purchase your own, very inexpensive off Amazon, we're going to touch base on that in February. So I didn't forget about you asking for a dip pen, Beth.
So are the classes consistently like at 6 o'clock every Wednesday, every other Wednesday? I'm having trouble finding them on the calendar.
Oh, okay. Ashley, was it going to be changed for the rest of the year? Can you update the class?
The beginning calligraphy class will be the second Wednesday of every month. I'm still adding them to the calendar as I got all of the the handouts you gave me, Rachel. So I'm
Yes.
going by. They'll be added this next upcoming week, but it'll be every second Wednesday at 6 p.m.
For
there's
the
some-
beginner.
Wednesday.
Yeah, for
Okay.
beginner class.
Yeah, because it used to be on Tuesdays, but again, so when we say beginner, we're going to go over the packet every second Wednesday. And then what is it, every third Thursday, Ashley?
Yes, every third Thursday.
For the advanced class.
Yeah, that one's not at 6 though.
Okay, 1 p.m.
Mm.
Yes. So every third Thursday is 1 p.m. And I will not go over this packet. We'll have, like I said, this year I'm going to try focusing on techniques and some project quotes each month. Just because, like I said, it was getting more complicated trying to gathering supplies each
Right.
month. So
So
I
is
hope,
it the same packet for each beginning class or is it different packets?
yeah, same packet.
Okay, okay.
It just allows us to repeat ourselves every month. Either if you need a refresher, you're always more than welcome to rejoin that first class of the month, or the thing is, we're constantly getting new people joining, and we hate to put you in our advanced class and
Right.
we don't even touch base on the packet.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
That'll help me find them on the calendar.
Yes.
Well, I just joined tonight for the first time because it said beginning calligraphy, and it sounds like you all have been doing this for some time, so I feel a little behind.
Well, no, I mean, that's the reason we went over the packet. I don't, that's exactly why.
It's
Um,
my first time.
Oh, okay.
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 Yeah. No, then that's fine. Because our friends always like to come back and retake this class. Again, it's their time to pick up a pen and paper and, you know, warm up their muscle memory and, just do some calligraphy with us. Even though we're repeating, it's okay. You're always more than welcome to come back. But yeah, don't feel left behind. That's why I throw the quote in there, because some people will learn the packet, but then say, hey, well, let's keep moving on. What else can we do? So I always like to throw a quote in there, kind of
Mm.
go away from the packet a little bit. But yeah, don't feel left behind. We're here. I explained it very well. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask me now, after class, or even send an email.
So you
Once
talked
you-
about bouncing. You
Yeah.
talked about X height. Those are terms I'm not really familiar
Yeah.
with.
Well, I'm actually going to speak on that right now. I'm going to talk about guidelines, what
Okay.
the lines are called. So like I mentioned, we're going to go over the last 3 pages of the packet. And yes, you're right. That's why, like I mentioned, this year I plan to go over our techniques in detail. I don't go over the technique, extensively. So we have bounce here, we have foligraphy, expanded, and flourish. So I hope in the next coming months that in our advanced class, I'm going to do some more projects and worksheets focusing and getting real in depth with different techniques, even different. So for example, in February, dip pen, I mean, that's a technique I would consider learning. For example, this is a dip pen. So for those of you confused with that word, we're going to be doing this, but it won't be in the beginner class. It's going to be in the second Thursday at 1 p.m. in our advanced class. But
Just said third Thursday a minute ago, so it's the second
I'm sorry.
Thursday.
No, third Thursday. I apologize. Third Thursday.
So do you do classes every week?
It's twice a month.
Twice a month? Okay, see, I'm just confused. Okay.
No, it's okay. I'll repeat that again. So it's every second Wednesday will be
Beginner.
6 p.m. beginner, repeating the packet.
Okay.
And then every third Thursday
Thursday.
will be the advanced class. And I don't talk about the packet. We just do techniques and projects.
Got it. Thank
Yes.
you.
Mhm. But again, you can always just come in and join the advanced class and, pick up any advice that I give off those techniques, even though you're still on the beginning stages. It's always good to chime in and learn some more. Okay, so I'm going to just go over the guidelines and what, let me get another tracing paper. Or, I'm just going to write on here. It's fine. I'll print another one. So you're not always going to hear it, but it's always good to know, because in calligraphy, modern calligraphy, copper plate calligraphy, any term that you hear, their lines are named. So for example, not these first two, don't refer to these. It's just focus on this top area. There's a line. I'm gonna write some strokes up here. So like we mentioned, we have our ascending loop and our descending loop. So anything like the letter T is an ascending loop, or here the letter P will be touching our descending loop. Ascender line and descender line. And then we have this middle area here. The top line of our middle area is our waistline, and the bottom line in our middle area is our baseline. And in between here is what we call our X height. And in between the X height, you're going to have all your basic strokes and your basic letter forms are always going to be lined up. And anything that stays in this area will be, like I said, our X height. And if it goes above, it's going to be referred to as go above your waistline and touch the ascender height. So this is very confusing. You don't hear it often. I don't use the term often because it can get confusing, but this is the terminology if you do hear it, and that's the meaning behind it. I do use the word X height a lot. I tend to use that more, but not so much these. But again, that's what the lines are called. If you're wondering, these lines don't refer to this. So I'm going to go down to the second portion, and this is different examples of guidelines. When you're practicing, guidelines are important. You know, you don't need any specific one unless you prefer and it works for you. But honestly, they all work the same. It's guidelines are very helpful to keep your X height lined up. So when I was practicing the quote on that graph paper, you heard me count, oh, okay, I'm using 4 squares. So those 4 squares were my X height. So that's why guidelines are very helpful. They're going to help you keep your X height straight. Here is our kindergarten, you know, our basic 2 dotted line formation. I use it a lot in the workbook because it's easier to practice this way without getting confused with all the extra lines. That's a really simple, easy one. If you search, I have the name, I can't think of it right now, but I think it's just like elementary line paper guidelines. You can search it up on the web and blank sheets will pop up and you can practice it that way. And I would consider the line below here on the second line to be the X height. Another guideline is a graph at a slant. So you'll find some with lines in a slant, and this guideline is going to teach you how to form your lines at an angle as opposed to just straight up and down. So if you want to teach yourself angled calligraphy, slanted guidelines would be the way to go. Or there's large slanted guidelines. This is without, well, I guess it's like a graph, but it's more of a dotted graph so that you can use a bigger brush here, a bigger, you know, flexible pen. Of course, everything in the center is always going to be the X height above ascending height line, descending line. If you can't print or find any guidelines, then you just definitely want to work with guidelines. Just grabbing a basic line paper will do the trick. If you have a small brush pen, just use 3 lines. Your middle will be your X height. 1 line above will be your ascender. 1 line below will be your descender. If you're using a bigger brush pen, you want to fill up 2 lines. Make sure you always go 2 lines above and 2 lines below. So if your X height is 2 lines, your ascender is going to be 2 lines up and your descender is going to be 2 lines down. And same thing if you want to go 3 levels of X height, a bigger brush pen, bigger letter forms that you want to practice. Same thing, 3 as an X height, 3 up and 3 down. The same rule goes for dotted lines. So you'll see dot graph line, graph paper. So for example, that one sheet I had, you can create your own guidelines here on graph paper. So just the way I sketched out the lines here, you can sketch it out on graph paper as well, or even dot. There's dot paper. I recommend smooth dot paper and smooth graph paper. I'll show you the book I have right now. That's the brand I recommend. But like I said, same thing goes. If you're going to use a small brush pen, small brush pen, one row up, one row down, two. You're going to do 2 lines for the X height, 2 rows up, and 2 rows down. And these examples are you creating your own guidelines, or you can just grab a blank piece of paper and just start sketching out your own guidelines. And that's pretty much what we have to do for quotes. When it comes to writing quotes on anything, guidelines is key to getting it lined up. But yeah, this is an example of different guidelines and what each line is named. And then on page 7, there's just a few tips that you can read over that I recommend if you're having trouble. Just basic practice, 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 rows and rows of basics. Try writing with different tools. And practice helps with muscle memory and eventually will help with shakiness. So just read over those tips to help you during your practice. Just our basic supply recommendation. Rhodia notepad is what I have here. Find this on Amazon. And this is the graph, or it even comes with a dot that was the graph and lined. That Rhodia paper is all smooth paper. Another smooth paper, if you want to do your own guideline printing at home or image printing, and you want to, for example, all these were printed on HP premium paper. So always recommend smooth paper to help with smooth calligraphy. Some brush pens I recommend, some large ones, small ones. Dip pen, we can get more into that in February, but just looking up, these are the actual brand names. So if you just type them into Google or Amazon, you'll find these different types of supplies. And then here on other, I always recommend Crayola is good to have handy, drafting pencil, or a what we call, which one mine is called, drawing, no, drafting, graph pencil. So it's either called a graph pencil or a drafting pencil. I learned that for a long time I was just using regular pencil. I mean, to start off, definitely use regular pencils, but I was noticing it was hard for me to erase when it came to sketching. It would just almost stain my image. And when I actually had this for a while, I switched over, and to be honest, I didn't like using it because we have a habit of having an eraser on the tip of our pencil. So I would use this because it was easy for me to go and erase. But then I one time picked up this and realized, oh my gosh, this erases so much easier than a regular number 2 pencil. So definitely recommend looking into, like I said, it's a draft pencil or graph pencil. Supply recommendations there. And last page, like I said, I don't go into details. This is just with modern calligraphy, I only focus on lowercase. That's why each month I like to showcase just one letter of the alphabet. because if you could tell, there's just so much more detail that goes into learning uppercase in this this is considered uppercase copperplate. And that just calls for a whole different class, which I hopefully can touch base on this year. That'll be a fun class to learn, kind of just go into details, because these uppercases have their own certain strokes have their own name as well. But yeah, this is just a little takeaway, and anytime you want to do a quote and incorporate an uppercase, refer back to this page 8. But as far as the packet goes, I am done with that.